Israel and the U.S. have unleashed war on Iran. Violence is spreading across the region.
The stakes are much higher today than in conflicts in the past.
I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Today we'll hear from Iranians sheltering from the attacks that killed the supreme leader. It's a weird feeling, this man says, to celebrate the death of a dictator while living under bombardment, fearful of dying.
Plus, destabilized Gulf states, the impact on global economies, and stranded travelers.
It just feels quite unbelievable. I was really kind of worried initially for our safety.
That's all ahead today here on The World.
This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler.
And I'm Marco Werman. Thank you for being here.
It has been just 3 days since the strikes that unleashed the U.S. and Israel's war on Iran. Both a school and a hospital have already been hit. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says that the military operation has killed around 600 people.
That includes Iran's longtime leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, whose death has sent shockwaves across the globe. Iran has retaliated, striking Israel as well as neighboring Arab countries housing U.S. military bases. 11 people have been killed so far in Israel. 4 U.S. service members have died.
Today, in a news conference, President Trump claimed that the operation to rid Iran of nuclear weapons had support from other world leaders.
Everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so.
He went on.
An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat.
Meanwhile, protests have erupted across the globe, both for and against military action against Iran. In Basra, in Iraq, demonstrators took to the streets to denounce the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the initial missile barrage on Saturday. Firas Mohammed spoke with the New York Times.
I can't describe how big of a calamity this is, Mohammed says. I am devastated by the loss of Iran's supreme leader. We have been orphaned today. There were also demonstrations in India, Pakistan, and Kuwait. Demonstrations in support of the U.S. have also taken place in some countries.
Israel struck Lebanon overnight after a rocket barrage from Hezbollah. The militant Shiite group said their strike was in response to Khamenei's killing and repeated Israeli aggressions. Israel's military threatened to destroy Lebanon's infrastructure if the rocket fire continued.
The chaos of this conflict was highlighted today when the U.S. military said Kuwait had mistakenly shot down 3 American F-15s. U.S. Central Command said all 6 pilots ejected safely and are in stable condition.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke today, saying the U.S. is not engaged in a nation-building effort in Iran. This is not Iraq. This is not endless, he said, though he said giving a firm timeline would disadvantage U.S. forces. U.S. allies have been dragged into the fray.
Britain, France, and Germany all point out that they did not start the war, but they have indicated they are willing to allow the U.S. to use their bases. Several of those European bases in the region were hit today. In Iran, these strikes have been hitting the capital, Tehran, the hardest. The World's Shirin Jafari has been in touch with residents there.
As the sun rose over Tehran today, the aftermath of airstrikes became clear. Plumes of gray smoke covered the snow-capped mountains surrounding the city. A brief moment of silence was shattered once again with incoming strikes. This eyewitness captured the moment the bomb dropped on a nearby building. "Oh my God," he exclaims, "they just hit the western part of the city." Despite the internet shutdown imposed by the Iranian government, some footage has been getting out. This one shows the staff from the neonatal intensive care unit of a hospital in northern Tehran scrambling to save babies. It's nighttime and they're carrying an incubator with the baby over the rubble. Speaking with reporters today, the head of the hospital, Mohammad Hassan Bani Asad, said that at the time of the attack, there were several operations on the way. Mothers were giving birth, he said. We had babies in intensive care, but thankfully we were able to save all of them. Hospitals must be off limits, the doctor added. Some residents have left the city, but others, like Mehdi, have stayed. He asked that I only use his first name for his safety.
همین الان چند دقیقه پیش تمام دور تا دور خونه ما رو زد. سوال عجیب غریبیه. فکر می‌کنم که
They bombed all around my house a few minutes ago, he tells me in a voice message this morning. It's a weird feeling. I don't think anyone in the world has experienced what we are feeling, he says. There's a lot of contradiction. On the one hand, we are celebrating the death of a dictator. On the other, we're living under bombardment and fearful of dying at any moment.
انفجار و اتفاقایی که میفته و از طرفی میدونی که اینا دلسوزی نیست برای کشور تو ولی شاید
Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed on Saturday in the early hours of the US and Israeli operation. Many Iranians have been celebrating his death, seeing this as an end to his roughly 3 decades of rule through an iron fist. But Mehdi says the celebration was temporary, and now many people are trying to survive this war on a daily basis. One of the first casualties of this war was a group of elementary school students in the southern city of Minab. The school was struck on Saturday, killing around 200 students, according to Iranian officials. This teacher who survived the attack tells local media that 12 of her colleagues were killed. We broke fast together the evening before, she says, referring to the fasting in the month of Ramadan. Now they are all gone. There has been confusion about who initiated the strike that hit the school. Iran blames the US. According to the New York Times, satellite images show that the school was part of a naval complex. But in 2016, it was walled off and separated. Meanwhile, as the sun set today, the bombings continued over Tehran, a city of roughly 9 million people. Tehran resident Mehdi tells me that he's been trying to stay calm despite the sleepless nights. He says the weekend's bombings brought back traumatic memories of the 12-day war last summer. That was when the US and Israel attacked Iran.
نگران مردمی همچنان از اون ور نظر شخصی خودم اگه بخوام بگم
I am worried about my people, he says. I am not optimistic that we will see a better situation anytime soon. I feel like we're going to experience a few dark years before we see any improvement. For the world, I'm Shirin Jafari.
The ripple effects of this war go far beyond the region. Tens of thousands of travelers are stranded around the globe today. And that's because several countries in the Middle East closed their airspace after the U.S. launched strikes on Iran on Saturday. And that has led to widespread cancellations and delays at some of the world's busiest airports. The world's transportation correspondent Jeremy Siegel reports that this is one of the most significant disruptions to air travel in recent history.
When Adelina Pietraru arrived at Dubai International Airport on Saturday, things started out like any other day of travel.
So we got to the airport, we went through security as usual, everything was normal.
The Romanian-born university student was heading back from a holiday with her mom. They spent a few days in the UAE before Pietraru had to be at school in London to finish her final semester.
And we were waiting for a bit, then they said there's a delay. We waited for about half an hour and then they weren't saying anything. And I went to check with one of the stewardesses and she told me that the flight has been cancelled and they haven't got any further information at that point.
Pietraru tells me she then started hearing rumblings from other people in the airport about an attack in Iran. When she checked again with the flight attendant, they confirmed the news and told her all flights out of the airport were canceled indefinitely. It's a story I've heard from several passengers in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes, that they had no idea there was a war unfolding in the region until their flights were suddenly canceled.
And that was shocking.
Switzerland resident Nitu Minocha, also on a family trip, had just packed up her kids' bags and was ready to head to the airport when she heard the news. Minocha says she spent hours going back and forth with an AI chatbot trying to find another flight out before resigning herself to the fact that she and her family would probably be stuck in Dubai for several days. The chatbot told Minocha that if she went to the city's airport, she and her family would be able to get vouchers to stay at a hotel for free while they waited for a new flight. Despite concerns of being caught outside in an Iranian attack, they decided to go.
It was risky, but still we don't have a choice. So we took a metro to go to airport, and there what we saw that airport was closed.
The airport had closed its doors because it was the victim of an Iranian drone strike. Videos circulating on social media show a dramatic scene inside terminals, with passengers fleeing as alarms ring and smoke spreads across broken benches, shattered glass, and piles of debris. Local officials say the incident left several airport staff injured. Major hubs across the UAE, Bahrain, and Kuwait appear to have been targets of Iranian retaliation for hosting U.S. military bases. As a result, the Middle East's three major carriers, Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad, often referred to as the ME3, all shut down or severely restricted flights, forcing some 11,000 cancellations over the past 3 days, according to the flight analytics firm Cirium.
We know that the Middle Eastern carriers are transporting through their hubs in Dubai, in Doha, and Abu Dhabi around 130,000 passengers per day. So it's a huge volume of passengers.
Mike Arnault is an air travel analyst who works with Cirium. He says over the past 3 decades, airlines in the region have become a major force in global air travel, connecting passengers to far-flung locations through their hubs in the Middle East. Because of that, these cancellations have had major knock-on effects, leaving passengers not only stranded in the Middle East, but also in America, Australia, and especially India.
If you are from, South Asia and you need to get to the United States, there is basically one option, and that is to go with Emirates, Etihad, or Qatar. And that's like a huge part of their business. The Indian diaspora relies on these airlines, so they're particularly impacted.
In addition to passenger air travel, Middle Eastern airlines are also essential to the supply chain. Jonathan Mellink with the air cargo firm Rotate says the closure of airspace in the region has reduced international air cargo capacity by nearly 20%.
The Middle East is home to some of the largest air cargo carriers in the world, and these carriers play a pivotal role in the movement of cargo, specifically between the Middle East and Europe, Asia and Europe, but they're so big that they're global players.
Mellink says the flight stoppage, combined with increases in fuel costs caused by the conflict in Iran, will likely have a double whammy effect on the cost of shipping goods.
Prices will remain elevated for a while, and that mostly has to do with fuel. Fuel prices takes up to 40% of the cost of a ticket. So you will see prices get elevated, either whether that is at the gas station for your car or in your flight ticket or in your cargo capacity.
Some airlines in the region are now beginning to resume operations, but experts say because war is unpredictable, that could change in an instant, pushing the industry back into chaos. And even if things remain calm and more carriers start back up in the coming days, delays and cancellations are likely to linger for some time. For The World, I'm Jeremy Siegel.
Ahead on the program, the view from Gulf states. Their hard-won stability is now in jeopardy. You're listening to The World.
This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. The U.S.-Israeli military campaign targeting Iran is triggering violence that spilled over into neighboring states. At least 9 countries have suffered casualties and destruction. Iran is targeting countries that host U.S. military bases or sit along heavily trafficked transit routes, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan. Israel has struck Lebanon in addition to its continued bombardment of Iran. To learn more about the regional implications, we reached out to Giorgio Cafiro. He heads Gulf State Analytics, a Washington, D.C.-based geopolitical risk consultancy.
The aim on Iran's part is to ensure that this chaos spreads and threatens the economic centers of gravity in these countries so that they come under pressure to convince the Trump administration that it is time for a ceasefire right now. And this is, of course, a very high-stakes gamble on Iran's part. The Iranians have managed to improve their relationships with countries such as Saudi Arabia and the UAE in recent years. Yet, as a consequence of these acts of retaliation on Iran's part, I think that Tehran's relationships with its neighbors are going to be damaged, perhaps for many years to come.
So you mentioned that Iran is trying to get Gulf states to put pressure on the U.S. to stop this conflict. What kind of leverage do they have to be able to do that?
Well, the Gulf states are very close to President Trump, as well as the entire foreign policy establishment in Washington in general. The Gulf states are huge investors in the U.S. economy. The United States and these GCC states collaborate across many domains: defense, technology, counterterrorism.
The GCC being the Gulf Cooperation Council, so the Gulf countries.
Yes. Donald Trump maintains close personal ties with Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman, the Emir of Qatar, as well as the president of the UAE. Iran is betting that the Gulf Arab states have no appetite for continued conflicts, and they are in a position to persuade Trump to halt the aggression against Iran immediately and begin negotiating a ceasefire at once.
Is there any indication that those Gulf leaders that are close to President Trump have begun using that leverage, have started to try already to get to a ceasefire?
Well, yes. In fact, the foreign minister of Oman made it very clear that despite what has unfolded during the past several days, there is always room for diplomacy. And the Omani foreign minister made it very clear that Oman is ready to jump in and facilitate talks that can end these hostilities and bring about implementation of a ceasefire. We should point out that the high revenue generating facilities and institutions in the GCC countries have been targeted. We're talking about oil refineries, luxury hotels, airports. If there is a perception that these countries are not safe anymore and hotels in the GCC are not safe and flying through the GCC countries is not safe.
Because these countries have really built up their economies by being, safe, draws for tourism, finance, etc.
Absolutely. The image of the GCC states is one of countries that are an oasis of stability in an otherwise turbulent Middle East. Now that image is being shattered. This poses an existential threat to the economy of a city like Dubai or the UAE as a country at large, as well as other countries in the GCC.
You mentioned Oman. Oman was mediating nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran, even just a few days ago. And so you see them as the most likely player in terms of bringing about a diplomatic resolution to this.
Yes, within the GCC, Oman is the most established, trustworthy, and efficient diplomatic bridge between Washington and Tehran. But others in the region, including Qatar, have also played a bridging role between the United States and Iran. We should also note that Qatar's state energy company has halted production of liquefied natural gas. That is what Qatar's economy is based on. All of this is just to underscore how much of a danger the escalation of hostilities poses to the economic interests of these countries. With the trade through the Strait of Hormuz being interrupted, this is an extremely serious threat to the economic health of the GCC countries, most of which do rely on the strait for gas and oil exports.
There has been some normalization of relations between Israel and some of its Arab partners. What does this do to that?
The United Arab Emirates normalized diplomatic relations with Israel in 2020, and I would go as far as saying that in the entire Arab world, the UAE is the most Israel-friendly country. That is certainly one of the reasons why Iran has targeted the UAE so intensely these past few days. And Iran has tried to influence other countries in the Arab Islamic world to not follow in the UAE's footsteps in terms of Israeli normalization. However, as a consequence of the horrors witnessed in Gaza since October 2023, other Arab countries that maybe a number of years ago, some analysts expected to join the Abraham Accords, have moved very far away from any potential normalization with Israel. For countries such as Saudi Arabia or Oman, talk of Israeli normalization is very toxic in this current period.
So I want to take a step back here and ask you to give me a sense of scale. How does this compare to, past conflicts and air campaigns that we have seen in the Middle East?
I think the stakes are much higher today than in conflicts in the past. What we've certainly seen since October 7th, 2023, is that Israel has proven willing to cross red lines that Israel would not have crossed in the pre-October 7th period. Likewise, when we look at the past several days, it's clear that Tehran is willing to cross red lines that we would not have imagined Iran crossing during previous periods of modern history. Iran sees the survival of the Islamic Republic as depending on Iranian action, which is much more intense and much more aggressive than anything that we've seen before.
Giorgio Cafiero heads Gulf State Analytics, a Washington-based geopolitical risk consultancy.
Still to come on The World, how telemedicine is reshaping healthcare in Brazil and a case of mistaken vocal identity in Ireland. You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. Returning now to today's top story, war in Iran waged by the U.S. and Israel, and expanding conflict as Iran retaliates with strikes on neighboring countries in the region. Earlier this hour, we heard how people in Tehran are coping with the attacks and how they see the seismic shift taking place since the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. We want to zero in on one key aspect of the fallout, oil. Iran's Revolutionary Guard reportedly started informing ships that they were not allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The passageway is crucial to the transport of oil, as Ahmed Abodo of Chatham House explained when we spoke earlier today.
It is a very narrow choke point where a fifth of oil and gas exports of the whole world pass through. It has significant influence over the world economy and the energy security of a lot of developed countries. That's why everyone is focusing on this strait. It is also characterized by significant influence by Iran on blocking it or impeding the freedom of navigation in it, which Iran used as leverage in negotiations before and threatened to blockade it completely. While no central decision has been taken yet to do so, we have witnessed already targeting of oil cargoes and ships going through the strait, suggesting that Iran started already to use it to raise the cost for the United States and Gulf countries and the countries that are receiving oil passing through the strait.
Wow, a fifth of all energy supplies pass through here. That's an incredible stat. Where does most of the oil coming through the Strait of Hormuz actually end up?
The most of oil go to Asia. We have China, the biggest buyer of oil, taking or buying oil from Iran and from Gulf states. I'll give you a stat. Almost 50% of all imported oil going into China come from the Gulf. 13.5 of all oil going into China by sea is coming from Iran, actually, which represents 80% of all Iranian oil exported abroad. So this can tell you the magnitude of the impact of potential blockade on the Chinese economy. And 90% of the oil going to Japan is coming through choke points along the way from the Gulf to East Asia. South Korea and India as well are affected significantly. Europe also is affected, but not as significant as Asia.
Yeah, so let's start with China. What has China said, if anything, about this conflict at this point?
China declared that it has 3 demands, which reflects, in my view, the concerns in China over its strategic interests. The first is for the war to stop. And it emphasized through Wang Yi, the foreign minister, the fear of spillover, which we have seen already happening throughout the Middle East. The second one is to resume negotiations. And this goes in line with China's preference before the war of a non-nuclear Iran. It opposes publicly Iran having a nuclear bomb, which aligns it with the United States preferences as well. And the third one, of course, using this war to condemn the United States as an irresponsible power that is violating the international law by killing a sovereign state's head, and Wang Yi again calling these acts returning to the law of the jungle.
So you also mentioned in Japan, Ahmed, they could be impacted. So will the EU, you said. How bad could this deprivation look in the EU?
The most significant impact will be the hike of the oil prices and the insurance premium due to the high risk that is suddenly happening in the Gulf.
You were referring to insurance premiums on ships?
Yes, insurance premiums, the oil prices itself, and the fact that these ships will have to go around Africa again to avoid this, which will increase the period of time. And of course, the prices of goods to arrive to Europe. And we are not here talking only about oil and gas. This will be a blanket blockade that includes everything, which will again might affect the cost of living here in Europe again. But when it comes to the gas imports, the Europeans actually, or the war might help the United States convince the Europeans to buy more gas from the United States to mitigate such risks in the long term. But I think there is still a significant level of risk, especially for the Europeans, if the Houthis join the fight, if they start to blockade again the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and subsequently the Suez Canal. I think the Europeans will have to pay a huge price for that.
So the Bab el-Mandeb, that's the strait at the south end of the Red Sea, right?
Exactly.
The Houthis, will they harass ships passing there in support of Iran?
We are seeing now phases which started by targeting the American bases, and then expanded to target civilian infrastructure in the Gulf. Yesterday, we've seen Hezbollah joining the fight and the proxies in Iraq threatening to do that. So I think the time will come, if this war continues, for the Houthis to join.
If the European Union turns to the U.S. for more oil, how well would that actually address supply and getting prices lower?
I think it will help the Europeans specifically to get control of the inflation and the prices lower in the continent, but I don't think it will help the international market, because the biggest buyers or the biggest clients for the Gulf states, including Iran, are the Asian powers, not Europeans.
So Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps says shipping is not allowed out of the Strait of Hormuz. Is Iran in a position to impose an official closure of the strait?
I don't think so. I think first, they don't have the military capabilities to implement effectively this closure. And secondly, while they have disproportionate leverage over this compared to the sales of Iran, which is not huge or significant compared to its neighbors, I think they understand the cost they will pay if countermeasures have been taken by the United States and Israel and Gulf states, in addition to potentially European powers joining the fight against Iran, because they will be directly affected. So I don't think Iran will declare such a measure, but they will continue to harass shipping. Another point I have to mention here is that if you are the country that is harassing ships, I imagine you will not harass your own ships. So in this regard, China is buying almost 15% of all its oil from Iran, and I think this will continue if they reach an agreement to spare the oil cargo that is going from Iran at discount to the Chinese market.
Even if Iran doesn't enforce the full closure of the Strait of Hormuz, wouldn't this hurt their own suffering economy?
Sure, but I think Iran now is fighting for survival. The main concern now is how to end this war. And I think Iran is finding its strategy of scorched ground very useful to raise the cost on the United States and its allies, especially the Gulf states, to pressure the Trump administration to stop this war.
How much of an impact will this war have on oil output from the Gulf states?
It depends on the choke points, the maritime choke points. If Iran reverts to targeting oil ships, I think it will have significant impact on some countries more than others. For example, Saudi Arabia has its pipelines connecting the east to the west of the kingdom, and de facto the Gulf to the Red Sea. It can use that to export its ships through these pipelines directly to the Red Sea. But other countries like UAE, like Qatar, like Oman, Kuwait, they will be implicated badly.
As for oil coming from other Gulf states, there are reports that Iran has targeted oil fields in Saudi Arabia, for example. What impact does all this have on their economies and partnerships?
Iran came out actually now and denied that, and they said we called the Saudis, and they explained that they didn't have anything to do with that. So if they are right, if they are honest about that, and they didn't do it, I think this is an attempt by someone to drag the Gulf states to join the fight. But I don't think the Gulf states are ready to do that yet.
It's so complex. Have we seen anything like this impact the region before on such a scale?
No, since 1973, the war between Egypt and Israel, I don't think we've seen anything like that before. Even Gaza war and the Houthis blocking the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, no, it's not. It's not at the same level.
That was Ahmed Abodo of Chatham House speaking with us today from London.
The war in Iran and across the region has dominated the news, so here are some other stories you might have missed.
In another conflict, Pakistan and Afghanistan continue their cross-border fighting that started last week. Today, Pakistan's president defended his country's ongoing airstrikes in Afghanistan, saying they had tried all diplomatic avenues. Pakistan accuses Afghanistan of harboring hostile militant organizations. This is the most severe fighting between the two neighboring countries in years.
In Myanmar, state-run media is reporting that the head of the military government there has granted amnesty to thousands of mostly political prisoners, activists being prosecuted or in hiding. The country's highest-profile political prisoner was not among them. Former leader Aung San Suu Kyi was ousted in a military takeover in 2021 and has been held virtually incommunicado ever since.
And in a remote area of South Sudan, at least 169 people were killed after insurgents raided a village there. This news reported by a local official today. The victims included women and children as well as dozens of combatants. It is the latest in a bout of violence that has left South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, teetering on the verge of civil war.
And those are a few headlines you might have missed. Telemedicine really took off during the COVID-19 pandemic. That was true in the U.S. and all over the world. But as helpful as it has become, studies show there are many challenges for telemedicine, especially in rural areas. That is because of things like poor infrastructure and illiteracy. Gisele Regatao reports on a new medical technology that's been deployed in a remote area of the Amazon in Brazil.
Dr. Eduardo Bolizani just landed in Jordão, in the state of Acre, a couple of hours ago. He's already training dozens of health workers on how to use machines that he helped develop. They look like a mix of a scale and a thin ATM machine. He calls them medical totems. The devices measure 9 vital signs, including blood pressure, heart performance, oxygen level, temperature, height, and weight. It's intuitive, it's easy. In 2 minutes, the data is available for the patient. AI compiles the results, and it goes to the cloud for doctors to see, he says. It's Bolizani's first time in Acre, a state with the lowest doctor-patient ratio in Brazil. This remote town, Jordão, is only accessible by boat or small plane. Bolizani traveled almost 2,000 miles to get here. Bolizani is an orthopedist who works at the electronics manufacturer Foxconn in Brazil. The totems were developed by Foxconn and funded by government subsidies. They cost about $18,000 each. Bolizani says Foxconn employees already use the technology and it works. They can reduce complication, hospitalizations, and also the cost of the public health system, he says. There are only 3 doctors in Jordão, including César Carvalho, who is Bolizani's cousin.
São quase 11,000 pessoas.
We serve around 11,000 people. For an area with a very vulnerable population like this one, the ideal ratio would be 2,500 patients per doctor at the most, Carvalho says. He tells me there are 4,000 patients per doctor in Jordão, which is spread out over an area almost twice the size of Rhode Island. And many of them have to be reached by boat.
Como médico para trabalhar nas áreas remotas,
when we go to remote areas, sometimes we have to drag the boat because the water is too low, and we can't get to patients, he says. Getting the medical totems here has been a challenge in itself. Ricardo Moura is a project manager for FPF Tech, a nonprofit organization specialized in automation that is coordinating the process. 2 people from our team went to one indigenous village to access the area, and they had to get there by boat. There are no roads, he says. There are 3 medical totems at health facilities in Jordão. 2 totems went to the Federal University of Acre, so researchers can keep tabs on the data coming in. And another 4 will be placed at indigenous villages in this area. Moura says they had to manufacture special cabins that will host those totems. That will allow for patient privacy and protect them from damage. The machines will be powered by solar panels, will have internet, and also include translation to the local indigenous language. Moura says this is a pilot project. We're starting this technology at the toughest situation possible. Later, we will define other possible scenarios for service, he says. The totems here are the first of around 250 that are being installed around Brazil and Paraguay. Some residents who attended the training had a lot of questions. Edson da Rocha, who owns a farm close to Jordão, says he's worried about the limited energy supply in his area and maintenance of the totems. It happens a lot in these projects that things break and it stays idle, he says. Maintenance will be the responsibility of the municipal government. Francisco Chachana Ichan is a healthcare worker from an indigenous village. He says operating the totem was a bit challenging. It's not very easy, but each time the person uses it, it gets easier, he says. Right now, the totems only measure vital signs. The hope is that starting in April, they will also be able to host virtual appointments. Fabiana de Sá is the director of the public health clinic in Jordão. She says patients here often have to take a 2-hour flight to see a specialist. If the totems allow virtual appointments with specialists, we won't need to send people to the city. They will be treated here, she says. Right now, Jordão doctor César Carvalho and other local doctors are contacting specialists who might be willing to work virtually with one of the most remote areas of the country. For The World, I'm Gisele Regatão, Jordão, Acre, Brazil.
A small note now on accents. Have a listen to this.
To enhance government communication, Seriously, that's one of your things. And the other one is to promote the importance of infrastructure delivery.
Perhaps you made him out to be a Jamaican politician lambasting his colleagues. Not exactly.
In recent days, social media has been buzzing over a viral video featuring Irish politician Thomas Gold, with many Jamaicans insisting there is something very similar about his accent.
That's Brian Pitter, a reporter for the Jamaica Observer, talking about Gold, whose speech to the Irish Parliament became a source of fascination for Jamaicans. Gold is from Cork in Southern Ireland, not Jamaica. In a conversation with the Jamaica Observer, he explained just how specific his accent is.
The thing about Ireland is every county and every city or town nearly has their own individual accent.
Gold's accent isn't just a Cork accent, it is a Northern Cork accent. When Gold told Pitter it had not occurred to him that his accent might sound Jamaican, the reporter seemed to have a hard time believing it.
You've heard Jamaican accent before. Do you see the similarities yourself?
Do you know, no, I never thought about it until the last 2 days.
Gold says after his speech went viral, some people mocked his accent, which he does not mind. Everybody deserves a good laugh, he says. He's gotten positive notes from around the world, too, so he is feeling the love, putting the Irie in Ireland.
This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. The European Union is trying to generate 42% of its energy from renewable sources by 2030. That goal has brought major backlash. It's being called Greenlash and has included sweeping protest movements and effective lobbying campaigns. Southern Spain is one place where this is happening. Farmers say incoming solar parks there threaten olive groves. Zoe Bass brings us that story.
This is a citizens' initiative set up to defend the rights of Andalusian olive farmers who are currently resisting a wave of large-scale solar park projects that threaten to uproot tens of thousands of olive trees, many of them centuries old. Nieves Garcia, who inherited a small olive plantation from her father, is one of those affected.
In July, I received a letter from the Andalusian regional government notifying me that my land had been declared property of public interest. I was perplexed because I didn't know what this meant and what significance it might have.
Now, under Spanish law, a declaration of public interest is a legal precondition for compulsory expropriation of land. And as Nieves soon found out, she was by no means the only olive farmer to have received such a letter. Solar companies offered these farmers between 1,000 and 2,700 euros per hectare in compensation. Back to Rafael of Campiña Norte.
Between 2020 and 2023, these projects were presented to the large landowners in the area by intermediary companies. These owners don't usually live in Lopera. They have no attachment to the land, often own many properties and see these olive groves as just another business. Therefore, with the offer of these leases, they see an easy way to obtain money. However, there are many small landowners who do depend on olive groves, but these owners typically have only a few hectares. Since negotiating with them is more cumbersome for the company, they use expropriation laws to force them to sign leases.
According to Campiña Norte, some 100,000 olive trees could be cut down in order to make way for the installation of multiple solar plants covering hundreds of hectares of land. Even if current legal challenges are successful, they tell me that an estimated 42,000 olive trees are still under threat. 5,000 trees have already been bulldozed away. However, Andalusia's regional government, the Junta de Andalucía, claims that the number of felled trees will be under 13,000. They did not respond to my request for comment. Energy company Greenlash also refused my invitation to comment, but maintained that only 36,000 olive trees will be affected. The solar company also states that landowners freely decide on the use of their land. Greenlash does not pressure or impose anything. Both the European Union and Spain's national government have set ambitious solar targets for the coming years. However, Natalia Corbalan from SOS Rural, a nationwide organization advocating on behalf of rural Spain, says it is primarily local politicians that must take responsibility for pitting Spain's traditional olive farmers against large energy corporations like Greenlash and FRV Arroyadas.
The autonomous communities make extensive use of European Union policies to absolve themselves of responsibility for the mistreatment of agriculture. This mistreatment isn't just national and European anymore. It's happening right here, at the hands of local politicians.
Public anger has been directed at the regional government of Andalusia, currently under the leadership of the conservative Partido Popular, which has enthusiastically green-lighted these projects. But at a municipal level, tensions are also emerging. I spoke with Francisco Sevilla, a United Left councillor who left a coalition with the Socialist Party in the small town of Lopera in Jaén.
A la semana de publicarse ya lo que es la zonificación.
A week after the zoning plan was published, it vanished, and nothing more has been heard about it since. Only recently, they were going to protect the olive groves of Jaén as a UNESCO heritage site, and now it turns out that we're going to ruin them and install a photovoltaic plant. It's incomprehensible.
No lo vamos a destrozar para instalar una planta fotovoltaica, que es incomprensible.
Almost all of those to whom I spoke told me that they are not against solar power, but they are struggling to understand why renewable development must come at the expense of Andalusia's centuries-old olive trees. Not only do these absorb over 10 times more CO2 than less mature trees, they are also an integral part of the social and economic fabric of this region. Local councillor Francisco Sevilla again.
These solar plants don't generate any kind of employment. What they generate is job destruction. I've always said that if the olive groves fail, the village will fail.
For olive farmers like Nieves Garcia, the value of her lands and heritage are without price. And that includes the survival of small endangered species like this scrub robin.
It's not just economic. They're taking my olive trees. They're taking away part of my life and part of the natural environment, my land. It's a very significant loss.
This is Zoe Bass in Andalusia.
That story is from our partners at DW's Inside Europe. You can listen to more of their work wherever you get your podcasts.
Throughout today's show, we've been covering the war unleashed by the U.S. and Israel with strikes on Iran, hearing the view from Tehran as well as the impact of the conflict spreading to other countries in the region.
Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, has called on European allies to support the U.S. and Israel in their war against Iran without getting directly involved. Rutte also said he approves of Washington's decision to attack and kill the supreme leader. Tomorrow, hear about the role European countries might play as the conflict continues.
We will stay on it, bringing you updates and analysis for what is a quickly developing story. The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston and from the Department of Communication at UC San Diego. Find us online anytime at theworld.org. With more of our original reporting on YouTube, we are at The World News GBH. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Join us back here again tomorrow.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. LuminaFoundation.org. By the PRX Ambassador Council, whose members include Judy Piggott, the Gruber Family Foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation, and Gavin Salmonese, LLC. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX.
PRX.